That night, Rarity dreamt of Amethyst Wind one last time. 2 times she dreamt of her, of this fictional mare living a very real future, and 2 times had Rarity woken up with a dull pain in her chest. When she would, eventually, wake from that third and final dream, a simple ache wouldn't be what she'd feel. In her dream, the sun had just risen over Ponyville, bringing with it a summer day like any other, like all the ones Rarity had lived through in her years after going to the castle, without twilight. One would think that she'd make an exception for such a special day, that she wouldn't bother with going through her entire routine. But she went through it regardless. Her little way of honoring the days when her younger self had spent hours working on her appearance, in the hopes of Princess Twilight commenting on it. Settled down in front of her bathroom mirror, the elder pony combed her gray mane, put on her best eyeliner and eyeshadow, curled her eyelashes, and powdered her nose. She was not the stunning sight of her youth, no, but she was still quite something to behold. Her face, thinned with age, bore few wrinkles. She still had a full mane, and her coat retained its healthy sheen. She stared at her reflection, her eyes dropping and lingering on her chest. She pressed her hoof on the spot where decades ago a pink necklace had hung. After a minute, her hoof fell, and her eyes rose back to her face. She asked herself if she was ready. Yesterday, when the news had arrived, she had thought she was. But now, hours or even minutes away from meeting Princess Twilight Sparkle again, she realized that perhaps she was not ready at all. Rarity, it's time! Rarity turned around and saw Amethyst peeking her head into the bathroom. She looked ecstatic, her eyes twinkling and Rarity's old necklace hanging from her neck. She looked so happy, so terribly happy. And Rarity smiled, in an attempt to be just as happy. It's time, she echoed, shooting one last glance at the mirror, before turning to Amethyst with a bright smile. Are you still nervous? Nervous? Rarity asked. Darling, I was never nervous. Sure, Amethyst said with a giggle. And you totally didn't try getting on the first train to Hollow Shades either. Rarity gasped. I did not! Come on, she's waiting in your studio. Amethyst giggled again and disappeared into the hallway. It took Rarity a moment, but eventually, she got up and followed after the younger mare. She descended slowly, carefully, every step heavier than the last. And though she told herself it was simply because of old age, she knew she was just stalling for time. But she did eventually reach her studio. As she had learned with the passing of years, time was not kind to those who suffered, and it did not delay pain when it was due. She stood in the hallway for what seemed like an eternity, heart beating right out of her chest, before eventually going in and finding no pony. Irritation coursed through her. Amethyst! She called out, stepping into the room, grabbing a stray scrap of fabric off the floor, and brusquely throwing it onto a nearby chair. I don't find this amusing at all. When no reply came, she huffed and walked over to her sewing machine, deciding she might as well work on her latest dress until such time Amethyst and Twilight decided to be polite and give Rarity a minute of their time. She levitated her glasses and put them on, before adjusting the dress underneath the needle and... Rarity? There it was. The voice of a lost legend. Of times torn away from her. Of a princess who haunted her every waking and sleeping moment. A voice Rarity hadn't truly and fully realized how much she'd missed. Until that very moment. She took a deep breath. reminded herself that she was over Twilight Sparkle, and then turned around. Turns out, I'm not ready at all. There she stood, like a gift from the heavens, looking just as she had a long time ago. There she stood, as real as she'd ever be. There stood Princess Twilight Sparkle, finally free, yet across an abyss carved between them. And how beautiful she looked. She was a vision, standing in silence under the frame of the door, her crown still gracing her head, and her violet eyes penetrating to Rarity's very soul. What was she thinking? Was she shocked? Disappointed? Awed? They stared at each other across the threshold, as if once more a younger Rarity had been rescued from a tower of books, and met the pony who damned her by saving her. Twilight spoke first, if it could even be considered speaking. I might like tea? Rarity ventured with a smile, knowing full well that was not what Twilight was thinking. I might need some to soothe the shock out of me. And Princess Twilight Sparkle smiled. Hours later, the princess stood in the corner of Rarity's studio. And what a sight she still was, Rarity thought. An entire lifetime had passed since last they'd seen each other, and there was a certain melancholic pleasure at realizing the alicorn still took her breath away. The princess, as she tended to call her ever since meeting Amethyst, breathed in and out, her curious eyes fixed on a sewing machine in front of her. Had things been different, had circumstance and destiny not gotten in the way, perhaps that scene would have come to be decades ago. Perhaps the younger Rarity would be standing beside her, teasingly pointing out that, "It won't bite you, my darling." But things were not different. Twilight's ears flicked, and she frowned lightly. That look of concentration Rarity had sorely missed. And wasn't it incredible how so little had changed in so many years? Twilight took another deep breath, and finally lifted her hoof, moving it toward the machine. Rarity watched in silence, lips brushing the rim of the teacup she held in her magic. And though she expected Twilight to touch the sewing machine, she lowered her hoof and took a dress in her hooves instead. It did not go through her. It was surreal, really, to see Twilight play with fabric, run her hooves over it. In the hours since they'd been reunited, Rarity had not approached Twilight closely enough for tact to play a part. No hoof shakes, or hugs, or... She cleared her throat. "What do you think?" she asked, stepping toward Twilight. "It's my latest design." Twilight's wings ruffled, and when she turned to Rarity, her eyes widened and her ears lifted. She'd done that several times now, as if her brain ground to a halt whenever she looked at the unicorn. But then she caught herself, and quickly looked back to the dress, the frown returning. It's very... Goodness! Am I such a jarring sight to behold that you can't stand to look at me for more than a second?" Rarity teased, even if her mock offense wasn't entirely false. Immediately did Twilight turn back to her, a bright indignant blush burning up her cheeks. "What? No!" she blurted out, pressing the dress against her chest. "I just... She faltered and looked down. It's... Rarity laughed softly, placing her cup on a nearby table, and catching Twilight's attention once again. "I know, darling. I was only teasing. 'Tis a shame not all of us were blessed with eternal enchanting looks, And finally, a sight for the sorest of eyes, Twilight offered an embarrassed smile. She placed the dress back on the table, and walked over to Rarity, finally taking a seat next to her. The distance between them was small. Quite small. But to Rarity, it felt endless. 3 words hung on her lips. Not the 3 words every pony jumped to at the end of her romance novels, however, for she had long ago lost the privilege to even think of saying such a thing to Twilight. "I've missed you," is what she truly wanted to say. But she did not. "Is it strange?" Rarity asked instead, because some words were better left unsaid. "To be..." She paused, and a mischievous smile decorated her face. "To be alive again." The reaction was immediate. "I wasn't dead. You were displaced in time," Rarity finished, her delighted smile only deepening Twilight's frown. The unicorn sighed and leaned back, levitating her teacup as if to take a sip. "I must confess that will never get old." Twilight laughed. And how Rarity had missed her laugh. "So, have you been practicing teleportation?" she asked, drawing a smile from the unicorn. "You must be an expert by now, right?" Rarity sighed theatrically. "I fear I haven't practiced teleporting in decades." "You haven't?" Twilight asked, her brow furrowing. Like time had rewound and they were back in the library so long ago. "Why not?" Rarity smiled again. "Isn't it obvious, my darling?" She lifted her hoof and, without hesitation, brushed Twilight's bangs back, allowing her hoof to later travel down the length of Twilight's face and caress her cheek. She was soft. Princesses. She was softer than Rarity had ever dreamed she'd be. "Is it?" Twilight asked, and though she tried to look stern, she sounded subdued, closing her eyes and leaning into Rarity's touch, relishing it. The coveted first contact they had once dreamt of. "What was the point of practicing teleportation?" Rarity whispered. "If you weren't there to be impressed with my progress." There was a moment of silence. Twilight opened her eyes, now twinkling with unshed tears. She let out a long breath she discovered she'd been holding, and Rarity wondered if she'd been waiting for that. The tacit confirmation that love had not died even then, and probably never would. "Silly," she whispered, lifting her hoof and pressing it against Rarity's own. "That's no reason to have stopped. Now, Twilight. It's unbecoming of a princess to cry." Rarity whispered, tears boarding her own eyes as she slipped her hoof from under Twilight's, and then used it to cuff the princess's chin. "You've got an entire new life ahead of you now. And you..." Twilight whispered back, and the words cut into Rarity's heart like knives. How dare she? Rarity wanted to say. How dare she still have such a grip on her heart? "Not quite as much as you do," she replied, trying so terribly hard to sound nonchalant, like they were discussing the weather, and nothing more. "But now that you're out, I shall try and make the best of it, won't I?" Twilight's eyes darkened, and she looked away. "It hurts," she said, and before Rarity could reply, she continued. "But it won't hurt anymore if I never let any pony come close again, will it?" Rarity stepped back. "What do you mean?" she asked, and she knew, deep down, something was wrong. Something was very, very wrong. "You promised," Twilight whispered. "You promised you'd come back. I guess you're a liar too."